Recently, I was discussing with a real estate attorney that I work with the next article that we were going to work on together. I suggested we cover in some way the zoning disputes going on across the country regarding data centers, specifically the resistance that data center developers are facing from local residents who live near a proposed data center that the developer wants to build. As we discussed different angles, it became clear that here are the zoning issues data center developers tend to face. The article was an article that already exists, probably 100 times over. Any decent land use and zoning lawyer could have written that article. They could have swapped out data center for warehouse or whatever other undesirable industrial use that a particular neighborhood or area was fighting back against. So I asked a different question. What do we know about these kinds of disputes that no one else is saying? That's when things got interesting. Most people think producing thought leadership is about the act of producing it, writing it, recording a video, recording a podcast. That's certainly part of it, but that's not the only part, and I would say it's not the hard part. The hard part is angle selection. An attorney has genuine knowledge and wisdom and expertise built from years of handling real situations. But how they channel those interesting, rich thoughts based on their knowledge and wisdom and expertise when they're used to producing and reading safe, generic thought leadership, like articles that provide overviews of topics or discussions of a recent court decision or proposed legislation. The most effective thought leadership is written from an angle that a particular attorney can credibly own and that few, if any, other attorneys could own themselves. Of course, not every angle is worth owning. So before we choose an angle and get to work on producing a thought leadership article, I run potential ideas and angles for my client's articles through 3 filters. Now back to my client. Data centers, as you know, are being built everywhere right now, and they are controversial. Communities are pushing back. There's noise concerns, water usage concerns, whether the tax benefits to the companies building and operating these data centers outweigh the costs to the local communities. My client's firm works with data center developers and municipalities deciding whether to approve those data center projects. So one angle for the article that we were thinking about was, here are the things that data center developers need to know about getting zoning approval for their projects. It'd be organized, it'd be useful, but any decent land use attorney could have written it. So we passed and we kept talking about possible angles. But then I asked, what actually determines whether these projects succeed or fall? And my client's answer was pretty immediate, that it wasn't really the technical filings. They know what they need to do in terms of the developers. It's the human dynamics. These kinds of projects, data centers, but really any kind of project that's facing some kind of zoning or land use pushback from an area, live or die based on the human dynamics of zoning and land use. They depend on people coming together, putting aside their disagreements and biases and working together, all the stakeholders working together to come up with a solution that benefits everyone. That's a different angle entirely from where we had originally started. Zoning and land use is a high human touch discipline, and the controversy around data centers being developed and built is a perfect case study in what happens when developers treat their projects like a paperwork exercise instead of a challenge for how to communicate with stakeholders in a way to persuade them to help them build this project that will benefit everyone in the community. So here's how we got from that first angle to the second winning angle, and how I decide whether any angle that I discuss with a client for their thought leadership content is worth pursuing. There's 3 questions that I ask in order, and they serve as filters for determining whether an angle is worth pursuing in a thought leadership article. First, is the angle something that a smart journalist could have written, or does it require specific pattern recognition from someone who has handled these situations repeatedly? The first angle failed, talking about what developers need to know, because that's simple. It's commodified. We know what developers need to do because it's pretty cut and dry. But the second angle satisfies this filter. You only can see the human dynamics problem, and you only understand it if you've been involved enough in zoning and land use disputes where you've seen over time that the human touch, human communications is often what wins the day and helps the parties come together to build a project that, again, benefits the most amount of people. Second filter, when clients face the issue that we're going to cover in the article or the piece of content generally, does it actually cost them dollars, deals, relationships, or outcomes? If thought leadership content and the angle that the content takes regarding a topic isn't covering a pain point for a client, it's unlikely to register with them and make an impact on them. When developers get the stakeholder communications piece wrong, projects stall, timelines blow up, approval costs spike. That is a set of real costs for developers. And finally, a third filter, would a prospective client read or consume this piece of thought leadership with a particular angle and think to themselves, wow, I need to talk to someone who understands this? Or would they think, this is interesting, but not something I really care about at the moment? Well, if a data center developer is heading into a contentious approval process, an article about the human side of negotiations, the human side of zoning and land use disputes is certainly going to be of interest to them. It is covering their exact situation. The reason a lot of professional thought leadership in the law and really across all professional services is forgettable is because it stops at the surface. The author is communicating commodified information that's been shared by many people previously in their shoes regarding the work that they do. Instead, they should be providing information that is unique based on their view of the world and directly colored by the work they've done with clients in the past. A well-organized overview about the permitting process for data center developments is Googleable and perhaps helpful to clients, but that's not true thought leadership. That doesn't signal to a potential client that a particular attorney or other author is someone they need to talk to about the data center development process. But if a senior land use attorney discusses why data center opponents keep winning fights they shouldn't and what builders need to do differently, well, that's going to clear all three filters that I just talked about. And that's the kind of piece that gets a call from a prospective client saying, hey, I saw your article. Can we talk? You described our situation exactly. If you work with internal or external colleagues to produce thought leadership, they should regularly be pushing back on topics that you bring them. They should challenge you to go deeper and tell you that the angle you had in mind perhaps wasn't the most compelling one available because it wasn't unique to you and doesn't bring new thinking to the table and to hopefully current and prospective clients. A ghostwriter who just takes what you give them and writes it up isn't doing the hard part of the job. The best thought leadership ghostwriters aren't order takers or stenographers who just show up, ask you what you want to cover, and start typing away dutifully to make sure they record all of your thoughts. They're editorial partners who challenge their clients like you through questions, through pushback, through a framework like the one I'm discussing, to find angles that are actually relevant, valuable, and compelling to the people that their clients and you are trying to reach. That's a different service, and it produces a very different result. It doesn't produce commodified content that could have been written by 100 different attorneys. It produces authentic thought leadership that reflects your view of the world and is targeted toward your ideal clients and the issues that they are facing day in and day out. If you'd like to learn more best practices for thought leadership, including best practices for working with thought leadership ghostwriters, check out lawfirmeditorialservice.com. We have more than 500 videos, blog posts, and podcast episodes that can help you do just that.